Hello, everyone. I'm on vacation this week, sleeping on sand dunes, admiring old houses, and searching for something called Uber lights. You'll probably want to Google that. I know I did. Since I'm out this week, Devin and I have an episode for you that's a little bit old and a little bit new. I'm Stacy Grinsfelder from Blake Hill House.
And this is Devin Caldwell from Our Philly Row, and we're the hosts of True Tales from Old Houses. We have a bit of fun bonus content for you today. A few episodes back, episode 35 to be precise, we interviewed Zach and Alicia about their amazing home in Milwaukee. They shared of their learning about Waldemar Way, a prominent Milwaukee citizen of the time and the person for whom their house was built. We had such a good time with their interview, and we ended up with more content than we had time for in the episode. So here they are again today to tell us about a very unique room in their house, which is common in Germany and the Milwaukee area. So tell us about the Rathskeller, but first, what is a Rathskeller?
Yeah.
We didn't know what that was.
We didn't know.
So it took us a little while to figure it out. One of the things when we first actually took a walk through, I guess it might have been that first day that I was there, maybe before you even came through, but we had a fabulous realtor. She was amazing, and she really gets old homes. And when I walked through with her, right away, she kept saying, this house feels like a party house. This house feels like it was like made to entertain. Like these people wanted to have people here and they wanted to entertain. And that really like stuck with me. Cause I'm not a realtor, so I haven't been in as many homes as she has, but the more we live here, the more I see that imprint all over this home. And, Wally really, from what we've learned about him, he definitely saw himself as kind of a Milwaukee rising star.
Yeah.
And he really was trying to position himself to continue on that path. So I think they really did make very intentional decisions about being a house that could hobnob with like Milwaukee elite to continue to move him forward in his career. And obviously he was already dabbling in politics at that point. And clearly he had aspirations for going further with politics. So initially, a Rathskeller, the actual word is sometimes actually Rathskeller, which is fascinating, but it's a German word. Rath or rat means councilman or like kind of politician, basically. And then Skeller means basement. So in Germany, in any of like the political buildings or like administrative buildings, they always would have a beer hall in the basement of the councilman buildings. And after you did your political work for the day, you would head downstairs to have a beer with friends. So Rathskeller literally means like basement beer hall, basically. And the place where they most exist in the world is Germany and Milwaukee because of the extensive German history in this city. So when we first walked through and we went down into the basement, Zach and I know enough about old houses to know that like a refinished basement in 1913 would not have been a thing.
Right.
Like they just didn't think of basements as living spaces.
Right.
So for it to have been a space that was actually like a livable space that was finished out, not just like a basement space. I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like, was this like servants' quarters? That would even be weird because you wouldn't have done that to your servants back then. Like that would have even been considered weird to have let your servants live in the basement. So we started asking lots of questions.
Yeah. But it's one huge room with a big fireplace in it.
A huge fireplace that's beautiful. And there's also it's that prairie style, like one whole wall is long windows. So there's a lot of light for the basement. And then there's beautiful original tile on the floor. And there's pretty fancy sconces. There's slipper shade sconces and the slipper shades are all gone. Devastatingly, but there's like 7 of them.
Yeah.
This room was fancy.
Yeah.
Who would put a fancy room in a basement? We started doing some research, trying to figure it out. And one night we were at Zach's parents' house, who are from Milwaukee originally.
Yep, grew up here.
And we were just talking about this and trying to figure out, like, what would this room have been? And immediately my mother-in-law said, I know what that room is. She said, that's a Rathskeller. And I was like, a hubba what? Like, what did you just say? And she proceeded to explain to us, because, they've lived here forever. They've visited different people all over the city. And, they've done different kind of like fundraisers at different times. And they've been on in houses on Lake Drive, which Lake Drive is like the big fancy mansions in Milwaukee.
Along the shore of Lake
Where
Michigan.
all the beautiful historic homes are and everything. And she said there's lots of Rathskellers in homes on Lake Drive in Milwaukee. And we started doing more research. Once I had that word, I was able to kind of take it a little bit further. And so here's the interesting thing. We thought that it was put in originally. Then we found the blueprints and it wasn't actually on the blueprint. So, we know there are some changes that he originally made from the blueprints. So we were like, did he do the Rathskeller and it was a late addition after the blueprints? Like, when did this happen? And then speaking tubes, that was how we found it.
Oh.
Sorry, I hope this isn't too long of a story, but that's right. How we found it.
How we found the newspaper?
The newspaper, yeah.
Right. Okay. So there are also originally speaking tubes in the house, but when I was trying to trace those through the ceiling is when I found that newspaper. That crumpled newspaper kind of plugging something around the Rathskeller. And it said 1930. And I thought, well, that makes sense because that was about the time he was really starting to do, he was getting serious about public office. He'd been an alderman for a couple of years. I think he ran for lieutenant governor in 31 or 2.
Yeah.
So I think he was like, hey, if I'm going to be kind of hobnobbing in the city and trying to have people over,
right,
I need me a Rathskeller.
A Rathskeller is the way you do it in Milwaukee.
It is.
If you want to be political elite, you got to have a Rathskeller. You got to have a place to drink beer in your basement.
And he knocked out, we've got kind of like a wraparound staircase that goes to the second floor, and it used to have a little powder room under it. And he knocked that out and turned it into a stairway that goes directly down into the Rathskeller, basically. It was a sweet deal. You could kind of come to the house, say hi to everybody, and go right down some stairs into the Rathskeller and start drinking your beer.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool layout. The Rathskeller currently needs a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a disaster right now.
Yeah.
So we'll show you pictures, but it's not a finished space, so we don't know when we'll get to it, but it's pretty cool. Yeah.
No, we're not all about the after shots. We're also about the before shots. And on True Tales from Old Houses, we know that these are a lot of work. And if you put your priorities down, I imagine that Rathskeller wouldn't be at the top of your list.
No.
Not right now. Yeah.
And
unfortunately.
I find I can effectively drink beer in any room of the house. It works just fine.
We just want to take a minute to thank everyone for supporting True Tales from Old Houses. Over the past few months, your ratings, reviews, and shares on social media have helped spread the word about the show. Please keep doing what you're doing. If you love the show, those are some helpful non-monetary ways to contribute.
If that level of support is what you can provide, Devin and I have no additional expectations. None. That's it. We are grateful for the time you're willing to spend telling others about True Tales from Old Houses. It really makes a difference. Now, if you do feel like contributing to the overhead costs of producing this show, we welcome your one-time or reoccurring donation. Over on truetalesfromoldhouses.com, there's a donate button right on the sidebar. If you donate in the $20 to $25 range or more, we'll send you a coffee mug with the True Tales from Old Houses logo on it as a gift of our appreciation.
Thank you so much. Without you, there would be no True Tales from Old Houses.
Today we are resharing the episode 11 interview that Devin and I did with Elizabeth Finkelstein. 2020 has been a banner year for Cheap Old Houses. The Cheap Old Houses Instagram account now has over 1 million followers, and Elizabeth and her husband have been featured in a number of recent articles and interviewed on national television, too. Through her work, Elizabeth tirelessly champions the preservation of old houses, and she has connected countless people with the fixer-upper of their dreams. Episode number 11, Everyone Loves Cheap Old Houses and Elizabeth Finkelstein, originally aired June 15th, 2019.
My name is Elizabeth Finkelstein, and I am a historic preservationist and writer, and I run the website Circa Old Houses and the Instagram feeds Circa Houses and Cheap Old Houses.
Yeah, and not only do you run those, but the followings for Circa Old Houses and Cheap Old Houses are huge. Huge numbers. I was looking just today. Do those numbers fluctuate all the time for you? Do you look at them or you don't even notice anymore?
It's funny. In the beginning, I looked at them a lot, and now it just kind of seems to have taken on a life of its own, much more so than I ever could have anticipated. I mean, I always knew old houses were cool, and I knew that other people must too, but I don't think I had any idea that this many people would be interested in like old pink bathrooms.
That's it. Well, just to let you know, in case you haven't looked recently, Circa Old Houses has 127,000 followers. And right now, Cheap Old Houses has 445,000 followers.
Yeah, Cheap Old Houses averages like 1,000 every couple days now. It's kind of crazy. It's one of those things where I think as the numbers build, then you have more people seeing it, more people sharing it, and it just kind of becomes exponential. So that's been really fun. I mean, I started Circa before I did Cheap Old Houses, so it's been funny to see that kind of like far surpass my first one.
People love cheap old houses, though, or at least they love to look at it. It's all house porn to me.
Totally. Yep.
Yeah,
it's like ruin porn, all of that. I've always said I'm a person who likes the before photos so much better than after photos. Like I'm always across the board. So.
Right. Well, I tagged you in an Instagram story because I had just read the article in New York Magazine about the couples and individuals who saw Cheap Old House on Instagram and bought it. What was that article like? That was so neat to see that come into fruition. I mean, I think we all share those pictures and think, oh yeah, who's that crazy person that took on that $5,000 dump in the middle of Illinois? And now we know.
It's insane. First of all, it's so rewarding. I mean, I spend a lot of time doing these feeds, and they're just labors of love, and I make a little money doing them, but probably not nearly what I should be considering the amount of time I'm putting into them. So hearing things like that, it's so rewarding. And I mean, honestly, I'm an idealist, and I only do things that I love. And I really do love, like, I just get really happy when I see that, because I really feel like it's making a difference, and it's actually helping people find houses and save them. So it's so exciting. In terms of the New York Magazine piece, I live in New York. I lived in the city for 17 years and live just outside the city now. And New York Magazine is like the last magazine I will ever stop subscribing to. I said to my husband, I'm like, this is not actually happening. I'm not going to assume it's going to happen. And then it actually did. Like, and until it came out, I was like, it's not happening. It's not happening. So when it came out, I was really, really happy. And it was a fun, interesting take on it. It was really fun to, like, I had known that people had bought those houses because they had contacted me, but she really got in depth with their stories and brought the whole thing kind of full circle. It was really, really fun to read it. And I liked the spin that they took on it.
Yeah, I thought that was neat too. It was realistic. That's what I appreciated about it, is that everybody who bought the house, their turnaround story wasn't always just sunshine and roses. You know, there was, yes, I'm taking a shower at the convenience store and I'm plugging in my computer at the neighbors and whatnot. I mean, they were really realistic about what they were doing in those houses and how much work they were going to take to bring them up to a reasonable standard. I thought that was great. It's important to know that.
Like, you'll take this from the article if you're an old house person, and you won't take this if you're not. I think the work is the fun part. I don't think that, I don't see it in a negative light that they go to these houses. I mean, I don't think any of them went to these houses blindly and thought that it wasn't going to be a lot of work. I think these are people that look for the work and enjoy the work and find the work immensely satisfying. So it wasn't a surprise to me that a lot of these houses needed a ton of work. I mean, that's why they're priced at $9,000.
Right.
Everybody kind of we're sitting in cubicles all day and wishing we could like use our hands and do something super rewarding. So it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, and I agree. I guess I said that in a more negative way. I caught on to the excitement that they had, even though I don't have this thing, I'm ready. This is what I want to do. And I'm here and I moved across the country for this. And that was neat. The excitement was definitely palpable in reading that article.
Totally.
I do have a question for you, though. Can you tell me what's your favorite house in like the last couple months that you just are totally in love with, of the cheap old houses?
Oh my gosh, that's a really hard question. The types of houses, I don't know if I can point to a particular one, but I always like really, really early, like stone houses. The ones that people are like, that looks like a murder happened. Like the ones like really, really old with like creaky little stairs going into the kitchen and walk-in fireplaces. I grew up in the Northeast and so was surrounded by super early American homes. And like, it's kind of in my blood. I don't know. There's kind of like a perfect mix of house that does really well. Like it's hard to put my finger on, but if you can find the house that's like perfectly kind of dusty and perfectly falling apart, but yet has like little like just the details are all like haven't been touched, like it's been like sitting that way for 80 years. And I think they do really well. And those are the houses that I really like too. There's this one wonderful fan of Cheap Old Houses named John who sends me listings all day long. Like he just like loves it and he's hunt for them and he's amazing. And he sent me this one house in Oklahoma and it was like nothing special. It was like a 1930s Tudor. And I put it, and as soon as I saw it, I'm like, this is going to do really well. And it was like maybe $15,000, which made it pretty cheap. But it was just that like perfect mix of like, it looked like it hadn't been walked into. The walls were kind of like that 1930s, like pink color. There was a phone sitting on the phone nook, like an old phone.
Oh, wow.
All these little, like the kitchen was like just falling apart, but like perfectly original and so cool.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite houses too. When you find things that are intact that theoretically shouldn't still be intact, but it's just amazing to be able to find those little details.
It's so cool. And, you know, I always talk about kitchens and bathrooms because I feel like every time someone sells a house, at least where I live, they flip the kitchen and flip the bathroom. Every time someone moves into it, they like need a new one. And so they're just the most flipped rooms in every house. So if you can find an original one, it's especially in a place where people don't necessarily appreciate original kitchens and bathrooms. It's really cool to see it because you're just like, was it just neglected and no one touched it, or did somebody consciously decide that they were going to keep this? And more often than not, I think it was just like they didn't have the money to renovate it. Thank God.
Yeah.
Right.
So I can sometimes, depending on the mood I'm in, just like go on and on about this, but it's like, you don't understand. I love these houses so much.
Well, and you should go on and on because you are our guest. So that works out perfectly if you get to go on and on. But I do have a question since we're talking about these old houses and you've been doing this for quite some time. So I was wondering how you feel or what you think of about the current climate of preservation. And do you think it's changing for better or for worse?
I see a lot of things going on. I don't know if I can group them into good and bad, but I think things like HGTV and social media and just the access we have to design right now is huge. Like everybody can access inspiration and design all the time. You don't have to wait for one particular show to come on. You can find anything anytime you want. And I think that that's amazing because it inspires a lot of people to do things with their houses. I think if there's an attraction to what you guys are doing and what I'm doing, it's that people, I think because of that, trends move very quickly. You have a trend and then everybody's seen so much of it that it's like 2 months later, it's like completely over and then we need a new one. And, I think people are craving kind of a return to authenticity and something that will stick around and something that doesn't look like everybody else. So I think we have at one point, like all of these shows and all of these photos and all of these people doing a lot of design work and we're being bombarded with it, which is great because it's exciting us about our homes and our houses. But at the same time, we're also searching for our own kind of position and place in it. So, I think in terms of preservation, I think that's a question. It really depends on where you live. I see, I live in a very historic small town just north of New York City, which has very different preservation battles than New York City, where I worked in preservation advocacy for a long time, and which was very interesting because there was such a land grab. You go to places that are very rural, and it's a completely different situation. So I think it really kind of depends on where you live. I hope that with all of these outlets and these new kind of social feeds starting, but it seems like everybody who buys one of the houses on my feed or buys any house now starts an Instagram feed about it, which I think is really fun. Someone once complained, she's like, does everybody who buys one have to start a feed? And I'm like, I want to see more of this and less of that. I hope everybody starts feeds because then you can see that people can actually do this. I think I'm really rambling. I'm going off on a million tangents.
No, you're fine. Keep going. We're happy.
I have a lot of thoughts on this. I do think that looking at and considering buying an old house can be intimidating to people, and seeing real people actually doing it and figuring it out is exciting and inspiring to a lot of people. And I hope it it allows more people to go ahead and do it.
It's a great segue. Do you have any tips for people who are considering buying an old house, since this has been a part of your life since you were a kid?
Oh gosh, I have a lot of tips. I think you have to have patience. I think with all that's out there, it's easy to assume that you should be able to transform your house overnight and you should live in a house that looks like everyone else's. And you have to realize, the house I grew up in didn't look like that until 35 years after my parents bought it. I look at pictures of when I was a kid, and there was no furniture anywhere. Everything was being worked on, and that was part of the fun of it. So I think you have to have a lot of patience. You have to enjoy the work. You have to, and I feel like I say this every time someone talks to me, but it's so true. There are people that will choose to spend their Saturday laying on a beach, and people who choose to spend their Saturday doing house projects. And are you a house person? Do you look forward to the free time so that you can delve into house projects? Is your spouse or your partner, whoever you live with, on the same page as that? Or are they going to constantly resent you in your house because you always want to work on it? And do you have a lot of time that you can be doing this and figuring it out yourself? Or do you have a lot of money that you can pay other people to do it for you? I think it's a lot of those things. I think you just have to completely switch your mindset. I mean, if you're the kind of person that looks at everything as ugh, now we got to fix this. Ugh, now we got to fix this. And you're constantly just want the perfect house. I don't think that's going to be good for you or the house at the end of the day. You have to enjoy the process of it.
Mm-hmm. That's true. It's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I feel like anytime I get something just right, 2 more things will break, and then they go on the list, and then it's just a dance, fix it, break it, fix it, break it.
Right.
It's also the kind of balancing, things have to happen in an order. It's I want to do that, but I can't really do that until I do this. Oh, I can't do this until I do this. And because, it's a domino effect, and you have to kind of back off and start with high level and then move down. And there's lots of things I want to do in our house, but I really can't work on them until I get other priorities taken care of first, because they'll impact each other.
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah. And the old houses are kind of like that. You let one thing go, and then very quickly it's I should have fixed that earlier.
Yeah. Plumbing. Can we say plumbing, people?
Yeah.
Don't let the plumbing go. Just don't.
One of my preservation professors always used to say, this is a famous quote, all great buildings have 2 natural enemies, water and stupid men. It's true. Water will damage your house, or someone stupid will tear it down.
I haven't heard that, but that's really funny.
Yeah, I like that.
So one of the articles I read about you talked about how you lived in an old house that your parents were renovating when you were a kid. Was that your entire childhood for the most part?
I definitely grew up in a fixer-upper. I have completely turned into my mother, because she would drag me to auctions my whole childhood. And I was oh my God, do I have to go? Now I'm I just want to go to auctions all the time. Yes, it definitely shaped my vision of what home should be, which is an expression of who you are. A house is not just something you live in. It's a constant source of projects, of personal satisfaction, of self-expression. My parents did all the work by themselves. They figured everything else, everything they could do, they did by themselves. And it was a real fixer-upper. And it looked like a showpiece when they went to sell it. But it didn't look like that. That's how I always remember it. But I look back at pictures and I'm wow, they came a long way. It's amazing. I think it was a big part of their relationship, and a big part of what shaped or totally spoiled my understanding of houses. I'm now forever really picky about houses.
So maybe that you answered the second part of my question. As someone who's saving up a great big chunk of money for my children's therapy, I wanted to know how you coped with living in a fixer-upper long term, because sometimes I think I just want everything stable so that my kids are not surrounded by a construction project, but I can't seem to get there.
It's so true. I have a lot to say about that. I think, I don't honestly remember structural instability. I think my parents kind of figured that out pretty early on, or the house wasn't it had, there were times it didn't, rooms didn't have ceilings and stuff like that, but it wasn't ever super unsafe to be in my house. I don't think that there was ever a question of structure. As a child, though, nooks and crannies in old houses are such an amazing thing for a child's imagination. And there was the front of our house was built in the 1850s. I'm sorry, the back of the house was built in the 1700s. It was the original farmhouse on the property, built by the grandson of the founder of the town. And then in the 1850s, he went and struck gold out west, came back and built the Greek Revival front and connected the two parts of the house through what we called the secret room, which was like a little tunnel that you went through, and it was like a miniature door. And it was like so small. I mean, it was like a closet. And we spent all of our time in that room. Like we would like play dress up, and we would like play hide and seek. It was like all the inspiration went out in this like little corridor. I mean, for a child to grow up in an old house, it's so cool. Sort of the stories, the folklore, the secret spots, the kind of quirks, and you use your imagination and you're like, what is that? And you make up wonderful stories. I mean, I just think that is so, so magical for a child. I don't think your children will need therapy. I think it's
not because of construction. Maybe something else, but not because of ongoing construction, right?
I mean, and this is like a bigger point, and probably not about old houses in particular, but I think that humans have a need to work and need to create things and feel productive. And an old house is just an endless source of productivity and projects.
I always say that the day I stop working on the house is probably the day that I die, because even when I get it all done in 10 years, like I think I will, I know that it'll never really be done because I want to keep working on it, making it better.
You love it. That's great.
Yeah.
I think that that's something that, if I were to credit anything for the sort of success of my feeds, I think it's that people see that and like, that's their escapism. It's like, I want to go do that, and I want to do something purposeful with my hands and figure that out. Because I think that that's something that like, all society does now is create things that make our lives easier. Like we have to have like electronic human voices in our kitchen to like go turn on a light switch. And it's like, and so everybody's like, I just want to do something meaningful with my hands. And this kind of takes us back to that.
I'd rather push a button to turn a light switch on.
I know.
Well, I'd rather flip a switch than turn one on at the sconce, I have to say. After living in a big old house where you have to walk all the way across the room and flip the sconce on, trying not to stumble or hit anything on the way. Yeah, I do sometimes miss light switches, if I'm being honest. Have you lived in other parts of the country, Elizabeth?
I've only really lived in the Northeast. I studied abroad for a couple years in Europe, but in terms of living in America, I've really only ever lived in New York State. I grew up rural, upstate New York, and then I went to college in the city and stayed in the city and was there a total of 17 years, and then had my son and moved about 35 miles north of the city. So yeah, I have spent most of my time on the East Coast, and I think it's the history out here that keeps me here. I would have a difficult time. Although, I didn't grow up with much of an understanding or appreciation of houses out west because it just wasn't my experience. But since running these feeds, I've gotten so into the houses out there. I feel like I could honestly live anywhere and gain an appreciation for the history and architecture out there. Something about the really, like I said, I'm such a really early house person that the houses out here just, are my favorites. I'm saying this as if I pick where I'm going to live entirely based on the architecture, which is true. My husband is like, are you kidding me? Like, you're really going to be that picky?
Is he into old houses? Was there a relationship based on old houses and old things before you two got married? Or did you just bring him along?
We are definitely both old souls. He didn't grow up in an old house, but his mother grew up in a farmhouse in New Hampshire on 200 acres. That is like unbelievable. Like exactly the house that I'm talking about that I would love. It was just huge and rambling, and the acreage was amazing. And he spent summers there, and I think that really kind of shaped his impression of home. It was so romantic going there and seeing that. Yeah, he's definitely an old soul. I mean, he has an Instagram feed called Cheap Old Trucks, and we both just like covet old things like crazy. We're both kind of introverts and like really into things with a lot of soul.
I get that.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to walk into an old house and just get a sense that, there's a history here. There's a there, and, you can just get that kind of old soul feeling. And, you just don't get that in a new house at all. And I mean, not that the new house will never have that, but I think that just only happens over time.
Yeah. Well, I was speaking on, Larissa and Chris have a podcast,
yes.
And I talked to them a few months ago. And one of the things that we started talking about, and it didn't really kind of occur to me until we started talking about this, was how old houses are kind of like the ultimate art form because they engage all of your senses. Like you see them, you smell them, you hear them. They're so stimulating on so many levels sort of when you're in them. And when people talk about that like old house feeling you get, it's really like so much more than just a feeling. It's like your whole being, like when you're in a space. It's so cool. And that's one of the most kind of alluring things about them for me.
Same here.
That's really interesting. And I had never, ever thought about that before. Devin, you're an artist, so you probably already thought that but I'm not. I'm just this person over here loving my old house. And so that makes a lot of sense.
I just remember when we set foot into our house the very first time, which was a little over 2 years ago. The only word we could say was wow. Just looking around and, other than the kitchen and bathroom, it's probably 70% original to the 19th century with very little updates because it was a rental for 100 years, which was to the benefit. A landlord didn't do any repairs to it. So it needs a lot of work. It's going to take us 10 years to get there. But it's like I'm sitting here in this room to realize that, there were kids in this room 165 years ago. And, this is where they grew up.
Right. Yeah. I knew within 5 minutes of walking in this house that I wanted to live here.
Yeah. What is that, right? It's like, it just hits you. It hits you so hard. Oh my gosh, I've fallen in love with so many houses. And
that's the hard part, right?
Well, so yeah, how did you ever decide on the house that you're living in right now? Because when you love them all, how do you ever choose? They're all your favorites.
It's true. Well, the house we're living in now, we chose for a lot of practical reasons. I was 34 weeks pregnant when we moved here. We were living in a tiny one-bedroom Brooklyn apartment, and it was just not going to work, despite my fight for it to happen, because I love living in Brooklyn. And so we basically had to find a place that was commutable to the city. And we happenstance on a town that I absolutely love now. And I'm like, what took me so long to move here? Our house is a 1940s Cape. So it's a small house, and it's got a lot of charm, and it's not a huge fixer-upper. Although that is in our future, because the reason I run Sheep Old Feeds is really for myself, so I can find one of the houses, because we're always dreaming about doing that. I think that's just like, if I didn't do it, it would be just really missing a lifelong goal. I'm constantly playing in my house, though, that I have here. We live in a place where it's very expensive. Labor is very expensive. And my husband commutes to the city. And so we just understanding the time and the fact that we have a child, like a little child right now, would be difficult if we were in an enormous fixer-upper where we live right now. But that doesn't mean if we didn't spot it, we wouldn't move to one immediately. Because, I think we both feel the pull all the time. We just want to do it so badly.
Yeah.
And you'll know it when you see it.
Yeah. Oh, God. Do we see it? We see it all the time. I think we're just real estate junkies. We've been this way for years. Before we were even married, we were going to open houses all day long. It's like what we do for fun. Is look at houses.
My husband and I, whenever we travel, will often pick up a real estate flyer or stop and look in the windows of, a real estate broker, just to see how much things are and what's there and if it's a happening place or not. It doesn't matter if we're overseas or if we're in Nebraska or wherever, we're always looking at real estate.
It's so much fun. I know. And it's such a part of our lives that when I meet somebody who is not a house person, I'm like, what are we going to talk about? I don't think it's just being a house person. It's being and I've said this before, but I have a lot of, my feeds are followed by some pretty weirdly enough for me, celebrities and artists and writer. And I think these are people who can afford very expensive houses, and yet they follow a feed called Cheap Old Houses. And I think it's because you have a creative vision of life. You're an artist of sorts. It isn't about the price at all. It's about the neglect and the feeling of wanting to save something. So it's not just being a house person. It's being somebody who has that sort of outlook on life in general.
Right. A dreamer. Someone who's a dreamer.
Total dreamer. Oh, yeah.
What is your ideal house? If you were to find the ideal house, do you have a preference, a style, architectural period?
I like houses that really embrace you, houses that are really cozy, that you can go into and feel warmth in. One of the things I don't like about a lot of new houses is they just feel vacuous. The the ceilings are just a little too high, or, like, to me, space is completely useless if it's not optimized and used really well. So I'd rather have a small house where every sort of nook and cranny is usable than to have a big, sprawling brand new McMansion kind of thing for absolutely no reason that you just have to heat and like fill up. I look for houses that just kind of have an innate charm about them. And I think the same is true for my feed. I think it's funny because when I post something that's really big and ornate, like those will get a lot of love, but sometimes I'll just see a house that just like doesn't have anything really special about it. People really connect to them. The ones that are just sort of like sweet and original and, not super fancy.
Are there houses that you see, I don't know, this might put you on the spot, but are there houses that you see that you don't share? I mean, do you share everything you get, or are there lots of things that you don't share? And we actually, as soon as I ask you that question, I realize maybe that's not a good question because people send you things. So you can tell me if you don't want this on the podcast.
People send me things all the time, but I'm pretty, my feed's pretty curated. So I have no problem being like, it doesn't sort of fit. People send me a lot of things. I get a lot of messages.
I imagine.
That said, a lot of people send me some amazing houses, and I'm super grateful for everybody that does. I get really sad when I see like super modern kitchens. So sometimes I won't post a house if the kitchen has just been like, it's weird because I love houses that like look like nothing from the outside, and then you look at the interior pictures and you're like, what? I never would have expected that. But I don't like the other way. I don't like when the outside is amazing and then you open it up and it's like been completely gutted and flipped on the inside. Then it's just like a big letdown.
Yeah, there's nothing more sad than to see like a beautiful old 1870s Italian, and then you go to the interior pictures and it's all sheetrock and Home Depot moldings and drop ceilings, and you're like, oh God, why did I even open this up?
And it's the same, I know, and it's that same like beige color everywhere, and like it's so sad, and it's just completely whitewashed. Like everything is just empty and void of any charm, and it kills me. It makes me so sad. So that kind of thing. Yeah. So I don't generally post houses like that. I don't know. It's hard to explain. It just kind of has like a certain mix of something that I know is gonna attract people. People love things with land. So even if the house isn't that amazing, but it's sitting on like 10 acres, a lot of people who follow me are looking for that kind of house.
So are you a realtor, or are you the middle person? So there's a realtor and maybe a buyer, and you're in the middle there. Would that be a accurate way to describe your role in matching people?
I am not a real estate agent. In fact, if I was a real estate agent, it would open me up to a lot of conflict, and I probably couldn't market all these houses in the way that I can. I mean, I have absolute freedom right now, which is so fun to speak about these houses and help other people sell them. My husband runs a digital marketing agency, and he developed the website for me and kind of comes at this from kind of a new media perspective. Like I'm totally like living in the past, and he loves old things. He's also like, well, let's kind of turn this into something that can speak to a younger generation as well. And so he and I kind of envisioned this from the beginning. And he's the kind of the technical brains and the business mind kind of behind what it is. Cheap Old Houses was like just started as a place where I could like put my finds, and that's kind of gone viral on its own. So there are opportunities there, I think, for bringing in income, because like I said, I spend so much time on it that it would be nice to be compensated for it. I mean, this is my passion, but at the end of the day, it is it's my job. And I think that I don't know how to say this. I think there's this funny idea like, well, you shouldn't be paid. Like if you love doing it and it's like a good cause, like, and I believe that if you love doing it and it's a good cause, you should make more money. And if more people could do things that are good for the world and that they really believed in, so I don't mind being the example of someone who has figured out ways to make a solid running sustainable business out of something that I feel is good for the world. So we are always trying to think of ways to supplement our time, supplement our income for this kind of thing. It's an interesting sort of like world we live in right now with social media, and how it has allowed people to make a living doing this kind of thing. And social media is evolving so rapidly that it's a constant like game of like figuring out where to take things. And it's really interesting and exciting and fun.
It is nice to have that freedom to develop your business in the way that you want to do it. And I think, I mean, I can't speak for Devin, but I am always in this weird position where people are really very, very happy to take things for free. But as soon as, money enters the equation, or this idea that maybe we might be getting paid for something that we love, suddenly that doesn't seem quite right for some. And I don't understand that, but I don't understand it either. I think that nobody thinks of going out and buying a cocktail and spending like $12 on it, or like buying a pair of jeans. You'll pay for things, but I think that again, I think there need to be more examples of people making for-profit businesses out of things that they feel are good for the world. And I don't think there's any shame in making money in it.
I also don't think that people fully understand the amount of time that it takes to do this. I know that, cheap old houses, that takes a lot of work, and I can totally see the amount of effort and that you need to put into it. And so I think people really don't grasp the amount of time, and you absolutely deserve to be rewarded for that time.
Yeah, thank you.
Because, you're doing this out of love, but, love only goes so far because you also have to balance it with everything else.
Right.
It's really true. I'm fortunate that I have a job and a situation in life where I have been able to start my own business and do it. But it's icing on the cake. I think everybody has to make a living. So I'm lucky that I get to do something I love while doing it.
Yeah. So, and this is kind of like a dating service. People might pay to meet their match. And I see it the same way. You are helping people meet their real estate match. So, that doesn't come for nothing. and if it's a love connection, then it's worth paying for sure.
Absolutely. It's the best kind of match. I think that's so true. I like that. I've never really looked at it that way, but
well, especially because you're doing a lot of the legwork for them. You're finding these places for them. So they don't have to spend hours searching for it themselves.
Yeah, no, that's true. I know. I do. I definitely see the value in it. I know how much time I spend. I spend a lot of time, I run Circa. I now have products that I have to create, curate, and fulfill orders for. I do cheap old houses. I also am the real estate columnist for Country Living magazine. So I write that once a month. I'm constantly, I help my husband with his digital design agency. I think we work a lot. We work all the time. And fortunately, we love working. So we talk about it all the time and do all these things. And we're people that just like pour our heart and soul into our jobs. So yeah, it's certainly a lot of work.
Yeah. So I'm not sure I remembered that you are the real estate writer for the column in Country Living. That's probably one of my favorite parts of Country Living to read is that little real estate section. Yeah. And now I know it's you, and that makes it even better.
Yeah, I did Circa, and then they reached out to me years ago, and I started writing their real estate column through Circa, and yeah, it's just kind of stuck, and it's so fun to write that column. It's every month they pick like, we'll pick like, if it's September, we'll be like, oh, we're going to do converted schoolhouses, and so I'll find them, and it's always like a fun, light piece, and it's exciting.
What are you the most proud of, do you think, about doing this kind of work? Like, what makes you feel the best about maybe what you've been doing, but also about where you're going?
I feel really good when someone buys a house and tells me about it and like up and moves across the country for it. That's exciting. Definitely just, which is kind of obvious, just when I help people find houses that they love or people have had a good experience through it. And also just the empowerment of, it's ridiculous, and I don't like to toot my own horn at all. But I will say it's fun to have become sort of like a voice and a leader in a field that I've always loved and admired, and I've kind of like carved out my little place in it, which is fun, and it wasn't necessarily intentional, but now that I'm here, I'm like, okay, I have a voice now, and I can use it for good things and things I feel strongly about. So that's very exciting. I mean, I've never kind of had that sort of platform before. So yeah, and like I said, it's just the kind of the collaboration. I mean, Ethan, my husband, and I collaborate so much, and that's really exciting because this is something we do together. Even though I'm the public face of it, he's constantly like, we're always talking about new things to do with it. And I hope that it's inspiring to other people to buy houses and speak out for causes you care about or believe in.
Absolutely.
I put you on the spot by asking, what are you the most proud of? Because look what she's created, look what she's done. But, when that table is turned and you have to say that about yourself, it feels awkward. But I admire what you're doing and I admire you. And it's very impressive. And so I think if you have a chance to give yourself a pat on the back, you should do it and not feel one bit sorry about doing it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely hard for me. I'm not a person who's like, my accomplishments. And really, I believe that everybody in their job is doing is doing a very good job, and certain jobs should get more accolades than other jobs. But it is fun to have, I guess I'll say this. I think that some people are in jobs that they don't feel is their purpose. And I do feel that this is my purpose. I do feel that everybody was put on earth to contribute in some way. And this is my way to contribute. And the fact that I can have a job that does that is like super exciting for me.
Yeah.
I think something that's been interesting over the months of doing this podcast is when I first started doing the podcast, before even Devin became my co-host, every episode felt standalone. It was this episode with this person and this episode with another person. But the longer I do this, I see how valuable each part is in the bigger whole of preservation. So you're doing this part of preservation and somebody else is saving old windows and somebody else is, teaching people how to put their house on the historic register. And all of these parts are so integral and so important to preserving the past and moving forward.
It's so interesting too. Yeah, because they require so many different skill sets. People who are like very sort of, and this is not me at all, but people who are like very engineer minded and like interested in structures and can kind of like figure stuff out like that. You're right. And then there's like, I'm definitely more on like the marketing side of things. It's so true. Someone once said that I used to be very involved in theater years and years ago, and I still love theater, but someone said that like putting together a musical is like the most, in terms of art forms, it's the most people kind of coming together. You have like producers and choreographers and directors and the actors, and like everybody's coming at it from like, and it's so collaborative and so wonderful. And when you just said that about old houses, I'm like, oh, that's so true. Like this is all, and in terms of this community, this is such an amazingly supportive community of people that I have met doing this. Like everyone is so excited and supportive of each other. And because we all feel like we're like fighting against like a bigger societal force of like the McMansions. And we're like, no, it's fun. Like, it's not just something we're into. It's like something that we can be advocates for as well, and support each other. It's like a huge team effort.
Right. I told somebody the other day, I said, you can pry my old windows out of my cold, dead hands. And I was serious. It's like, no, they are staying forever. Somebody was talking about something, wouldn't it be better if you just, replace those or fix them? Oh, no. Clearly you do not know me.
I know. I was at a party like a couple weeks ago, and I started talking to this guy who, I mean, a major house in our hometown, in the town I live in, like a huge 100-year-old mansion was torn down and it's being replaced with like a big stucco thing. And he was saying, well, but that was like decrepit and this thing's going to last forever. And I'm like, we have to agree to disagree. Like, I cannot go down this road with you. Like, trust me, you don't want to go down this road with me. And I was like, we just have to like end this conversation. Like, I don't know. And I was like, you know what will also last forever? Like a McDonald's styrofoam hamburger container. But like, we don't want something lasting forever.
Yeah, I always know when I'm just, when you're at the party and you're like in the wrong crowd. You stick out like a sore thumb. I do anyway. And as much as I talk too, I get myself in trouble sometimes, and then I have to.
Social media has kind of put this false idea in our heads that like everybody's a house person, because you and I we spend a lot of time talking to people who are like in our camp and we get it. And then I go to a party in the real world and I'm like, oh, like no one else really talks about this all the time. Like it's just sort of
right. Yeah, that's funny.
I'm just a nerd again at the party.
I think you're right. That is a false sense of security. I surround myself with only Old House Instagram accounts, and people are sending me messages to ask questions, and I get to talk about old windows. And, I belong to a weekly running group, and I still want to talk about houses. And every time I get there, I think, oh, yeah, they don't really care at all, and I'm still like ready to talk about houses.
Well, but like, how cool is that? Because when I think about when my parents restored their house, they didn't have YouTube. They didn't, they had to like really figure it out or ask someone who may or may not have known what they were doing or pay someone to do it. But we have like, now if we don't know how to do something, we can just look it up or like put an Instagram story out there and get 1 million people responding back telling us how to do it. It's amazing. It's a very good thing for the old house world. If we're going back to trends that are happening now. Makes the whole thing a lot less intimidating to have like a supportive group of other crazy people.
Right. I agree. Larissa, on our interview with Larissa from Old House Love, she was talking about her big dream of moving a bunch of houses, buying some land and moving old houses so that there would be this big sort of subdivision of old houses instead of cookie cutter houses. And
those two are amazing. I think they're so cool because like they do all the things I can't do. I mean, I would love it if I could just like all the houses I fall in love with, I could just move and restore. And they are so handy. And like,
she said she describes it as an unrealistic dream. And I said, I don't think so. I think if anybody could do it, it would be you two. You could do it.
Yeah, they could do it. Totally do it.
Yeah.
They're awesome. No, for sure. That would be really cool though.
But I keep finding myself thinking, well, I would like to live in that subdivision. That would be pretty nice, kind of like a little old house commune.
Right? I know.
All right. Well, we have been almost recording for about an hour, and I want to totally respect your time because I appreciate so much that you were willing to do this.
Oh my gosh, of course.
It's been a great experience to chat with you and to learn more about circa houses and cheap old houses. I've been a follower for quite a long time, so this has just been an honor to have you on our show.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me and for also saving houses.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, before I go, I keep calling it Circa Old Houses because I'm looking at the Instagram, but do you just call it Circa Houses? Like, have I just completely messed this up?
No, it's confusing. So when we first started, our domain was Circa Houses. It's now Circa Old Houses, which is our website domain. But our Instagram handle has never changed. So our Instagram handle is Circa Houses. So the website is circaoldhouses.com and the Instagram handle is @circahouses.
Okay, excellent. I'm glad that you clarified that because I would hate to know that I just messed that up for an entire hour.
No, you didn't. You did.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much. It's been really great.
Thank you so much, guys. Well, enjoy the rest of your day.
All right,
you
too.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses today. Just a reminder that we are currently seeking guests who have experienced what they believe to be paranormal activity for our October Ghost Story episodes. If that's you, head on over to the website and drop us a message.
For more information about this episode, including show notes and transcripts, visit truetalesfromoldhouses.com. Until next time.
Bye for now.